In our introductory lectures, we have tried to define management, but as all of us understand that management will relate to a situation where more than one person is there. And so, when we are talking about this issue, we have to understand the concept of an organization. In today's lecture, I am going to tell you what an organization means, how it is created, what are different types of organizations, and why should we actually study organizations, and if time permits, perhaps we can also have an interview with someone who created an organization. So, first let us see the concept. Can you see an organization? Can you see an organization? Perhaps you believe you can see an organization, but you can see the buildings, you can see the employees, you can see the factory, or you can see the machines. So, what is organization? Machine is an organization, or building is an organization, or factory is an organization? That is the issue I am trying to discuss with you today. It is also interesting to emphasize that we can refer to church, hospitals, schools, industry, army, municipality, factories, colleges, universities, etc. as some of the types of organizations. So, if we are looking at these examples, that these are organizations and the building is not an organization, so what makes an organization? Maybe you have given some thought to this, or you are thinking right now. Can you say what is an organization? Okay. To talk about to what exactly organization is and why are we interested in knowing about organizations in a course on introduction to management? What are the components of an organization? What are the dimensions of an organization? Why organization theory and studies are important? Who makes an organization? And how organization is created? And there are many more questions which must be coming to your mind, and there are many more unsolved questions. But the idea here is that when we are talking about management, we have to understand management within the perspective of an organization. So, we talk about organization management. So, organizations as diverse as church, a hospital, or an industry have certain common characteristics. You must be wondering, how can a church and a school and a factory they can have common characteristics? But the thing is, yes, the answer is yes. They are all social entities. They are all goal directed. They are designed as coordinated entities and activity systems, and they are linked to the external environment. In other words, what we are trying to understand is that an organization is not there in a vacuum. It is not there in a vacuum. It is there within a social system. Are you getting that? We have not yet come to the actual exact definition of an organization. We are coming to that. So, the key element of an organization is not a building or not even a set of policies. Even though we say, okay, this is IIT, but there is something more which we call as an organization. It is something more that gives the success to this organization. Let us look at that. So, put together to a preliminary definition of an organization, we will first look at Sheen's definition. Sheen, in his book on organizational psychology, has tried to define an organization as the coordinated effort of a number of people to achieve some common explicit goal. That means, a number of people come together to achieve some common explicit goal. Okay. So, goal is there, some people are there, okay, and there is a process of achieving this goal. So, that means people make an organization and goal is an important factor in an organization. So, let us see, we start the issue here from how an organization is created. An organization starts with an idea. First there is an idea, and this idea then is translated into some kind of a organization design, and then the design also the goals, perhaps the organization design, and then the goals as we are seeing. Let me just show this diagram, and then we also define the organizational activities, and finally the organizational effectiveness. So, what we are saying that an idea first begins and then the blueprint is made, and then you have the design. Design means what kind of a manufacturing, how many people, what infrastructure will need for this, what financial aspects, how much money we will be needing for this, who will run the organization, what will be the organizational structure in terms of hierarchy, all these issues, okay, we decide. So, if it is a small firm, then the parameters are different. If it is a large firm of 20,000 employees, parameters are different. Okay. So, that idea, but the idea itself is that what are we going to do? Are we going to manufacture? Are we going to have a computer software firm, or we are going to have some kind of a building industry, or some kind of a farming sector, or some educational organization, or the media company. What are we going to have? Okay, that is the first idea, and then from the idea the blueprint, and then you have the organization designs and goals, and then the activities begin which will lead to the effectiveness of a system. So, when we look at this diagram, the idea, the person who has this idea is, perhaps we call that person as an entrepreneur. Okay. It is not necessary that entrepreneur alone will have a tiny company or something of that kind, but the entrepreneurship begins in the minds of people, and for every organization there may be one person or there may be 10 persons. So, it starts in the minds of people. Perhaps you had never given any thought to this idea that we are talking about organization and big buildings are there, big infrastructures are there, but actually everything started in the minds of people. So that is what I wanted you to understand. So, when we are talking about an organization, we have to understand that the boundaries between departments or between organizations, okay, will become more flexible and perhaps diffuse as companies face new external challenges. As I said short while ago, that within an organization, within an environment, an organization is there, and there may be number of organizations within an environment or within a society. And the organization, of course, is a closed system when you are looking at only organization within itself. But when you look at that with an environmental perspective and the social or the national perspective, you also find that also functions as an interdependent kind of a unit sometimes. So, as we are growing, we find growing in terms of the maturity of business environment and the business and the development, growing I am meaning in that sense. Then we have to understand that organizations have to interact with their customers, with their suppliers, and with their competitors. And so, as a result of that, some of the other external challenges are there, and in fact the other challenges are, as we have listed here, are the government policies, the political systems, and the emphasis and the competition in production. It is also seen that sometimes organizations have strategic linkages with other companies, and as we are seeing that in the mergers and the acquisitions that we have the part of the strategic management today, this time, this millennium is perhaps going to give you many such perhaps news and scenarios. So, we have now moved from the organization as a very closed system to also organization becoming a larger system. So, when we are looking at organization as a system, then you have the input, transformation. So, you have the input, you have the transformation, you have the output, and the output will result into performance, production services, and so on. So, we are moving on to talk about that a closed system, as I said, the closed system when explained the organization as a closed system, we find that we are not really interacting with the outside world, and although it is difficult to really comprehend about an organization as totally a closed system in today's context, we are talking about the earlier approaches which were talking about organization as a closed system. Now, today when we are talking about an organization from the time of scientific management, industrial engineering movement, leadership studies, these have suggested that the system could be made effective only with closed system assumptions. They have suggested that, which is also quite easy. But in today's context, we find that this implied assumptions that the environment is always stable and this is without change, without challenges or predictable, perhaps is not really true. And we are working within a closed system, but when we are looking at the actual business, then we have to look at the environment, because if I manufacture something and keep that in my godown, is that enough? No, I have to market that, I have to sell that in the market with market competition, and I have to see that what new product has come in competition to what I am manufacturing or I am selling, or what new idea, what new system has come up in the market. Okay. So, I have to always go out from my closed system to see the environment. And now if I assume that okay, the external market is always stable or always non-changing, we can say without change, perhaps we aren't really doing the homework properly. We have to understand that the environment is ever changing and it's not always stable. In fact, in a developing country like India, it's so much changing, ever changing, volatile at times, and the globalization, we find that there is so much change every day. I recollect just 2 years ago I went abroad, I saw something, then I was excited, and when I came back to India I found, oh, that is available in India as well. Now 2 years later I find Indian market is flooded with some of those electronic goods, which I thought was something amazing 2 years ago when I went abroad. So the way our Indian market is going and the way our organizations are going, we have no perhaps possibility of thinking about only as a closed system. Even though we do talk about organization as a closed system when it comes to some of the internal processes. So, we can't say that it is not a closed system, it is a closed system, but what we are saying that in today's time with so much of knowledge explosion, so much of a business scenario changing, we have to understand that no organization can survive unless that has interaction with other organizations and other part of the society and other part of the globe. That is why it has to be considered as an open system as well. That is the idea. So, when we are talking about some of these issues, okay, so only partially we can say that some of the disciplines, when they are assuming that okay, these are the stable systems, only partially we can say that is true, because without that we can't do theorizing, and that is why perhaps we have to assume certain things as certain point of time. But at the same time we have to understand that the issue of change is very, very important, and in fact that is a great challenge whenever we are talking about management. However, with newer knowledge, it has been realized that any system is embedded into a broader environmental system. That was the point I was discussing, that if it is in a broader environmental system, then we have to look at its interaction with the outside world, not only within the world. Okay. Now, the attrition rates we find. Why attrition rates? Because the other people are ready to pay me more. There the work conditions are much better. Okay, that work offers me much greater challenge. Why not there? That is close to my house. There are so many reasons. Okay, and so for every organization to retain good employees is a great challenge. So that is one of the management strategies. So within an organization, what we have to see, that within the closed system also there are some inputs coming from the external world, we can say. So, this brings us to understand the issues, some of the issues about the type of organizational configurations. Let us see what are the organizational configurations. We have the technical core, we have top management, we have middle management, we have technical support, we have administrative support, and all these together perhaps will result into the final organization system, even though they may vary in size depending upon the technology, environment and other factors. So, some of these configurations you will find in most of the organizations, even though they may be of different types. Now, when we look at these organizations within within a formal system, then we find that this is the typical organizational chart. You can see that here are the managers. Well, I could have drawn this figure, much lower, like you have the workmen, you have the workers, you have the supervisors, then you have the managers, and then this takes us to the general manager. There are different general managers for different departments, and then these general managers will actually report to the director or business, director business or director production or whatever. Okay. Then this goes to the executive director and perhaps the chairman of the company. So, this is a typical we can say the organization chart, and which may differ depending on the size and technology and so on. So, this brings us to the issue of types of organizations. Some of you may be wondering, types means, is it the size, is it the production, is it the technology? So, what is it? So, when we are talking about the types of organization, we can actually classify organization as the large or small. We can classify them as the multinational, national. We can classify them as profit making and non-profit making. When I was giving you the example just now, I said churches are also organizations. Okay, for that matter, prisons are also organizations, and temples are also organizations, religious excuse me, religious organizations, they are also organizations. So, when we are saying profit making and non-profit making, we mean that. Okay. But largely when we are looking at the organization studies, large number of studies are there in the profit making organizations. Only recently of late we have seen some studies are coming up which are the non-profit making kind of studies. Then we also can classify organizations as the public sector organizations and the private sector organizations. We can talk about an entrepreneurs organization, which is in private sector, and it is that first generation kind of a business that an organization that an entrepreneur might start. Okay. In addition to this, we can classify organizations as the organizations, manufacturing organizations. We can talk about the organizations which are there for the development purposes, or we are talk about the organizations, business organizations, or and so on. So, when we are looking at the size, technology, goals and cultures, we can say that the organizations could be understood as the productive organizations. Okay. Productive organizations, when we say, we classify them as the agriculture and industry. And when we say agriculture and industry are the productive organizations, we define them as the productive organization is the one that generates wealth for society. And as all of us understand, no society can survive unless there is wealth in that society. And so, agriculture and industry are the two sources of generation of wealth. Okay. And remember, nobody is generating wealth just for oneself, because that generation of wealth percolates in the society, and so we become rich, we become developed and so on. Okay. But the society cannot survive only by the wealth alone. We need other kinds of organizations. So, there are development organizations like schools. You can also put other development agencies. The idea of development organizations is that this develops the moral values among the future citizens of a society. Okay. I do not know whether that responsibility the organizations are following, but basically the development organizations are supposed to generate not only the basic education, that is one point of course, but also development of moral values in the growing citizens of the society, the children. Then we also need maintenance organizations. Unless we have the social and maintenance organizations, how society survives? So, we have hospitals, we have army, we have municipality, we have clubs, we have churches and so on. Obviously, the responsibility of sustaining a society rests with these maintenance organizations. That is why we look at municipalities with great expectations. Okay, we have to go to hospitals again with great expectations that okay, everything will be all right, and the clubs and churches again we go there for the social reason. So, we are talking about development organizations. No society can survive unless we have knowledge in that society, unless we create new knowledge, and unless we have the higher order learning. And so, when we are talking about this kind of organizations, the examples, the good examples of that could also be IIT and all the university of higher learning, and where they are trying to develop the intellectual potentials, innovations, create new ideas, new scientific endeavors, and because no society can also survive unless we have innovation in our society. And so, for development and survival and growth of a society, we do need these kinds of development organizations. So, we have discussed about various types of organizations, their objectives, and we are trying to understand that no society or no nation can survive and grow without organizations. Even though when we are looking at organization management, our great emphasis perhaps is on the first category, that is the organizations which are trying to create wealth for society. And of course, something a little bit more on the development of society in terms of the schools and colleges. Only in the recent years our attention has been drawn to non-profit making organizations, as I said just now, and all these organizations in combination are important for any society. If you look at your life, when you began, you were born in a hospital, you went to school, you went to kindergarten, you went to college, you went to do your job, you went to earn your livelihood, you worked there for 25-30 years, then you do something else. Some of you have started your own organizations, then finally we grow, we become old, and when we pass away, everywhere you find that organizations are there to actually help us in our lives and in the development of society. So, organizations, the word organization is actually many things at the same time, and this is very much necessary for us to understand in a course in management, that what is the meaning of an organization, which organization are we talking about, and which type of organization is important, because the another important aspect of understanding this organization is also the philosophy of an organization. Some organizations are bureaucratic organizations, some organizations are participative organizations. So, when you have, so basically what we are talking about is the values which flow from top to bottom, or the philosophy of an organization that will create a culture for an organization and perhaps which percolates down. So, also when we are looking at different types of organization, we have to look at these aspects of organizations which are based on the philosophy, mission and values of the organization, because much of your production, much of your survival, much of the success of your organization will also depend on the type of mission that you have, the type of values that you have and the philosophy that you have. So, if you have a participative culture in your organization, then the results may be different than the kind of a bureaucratic system that you may have in your organization. Later in this course, we are going to talk about the participative organization, participative culture and participative management, which is becoming very important in the years to come. So, with these analysis, what we have seen that the organizations which are of different structure, different technology, different philosophy, different culture, different kind of we can say purpose, different objective. It is not one thing at the same time, and when we are managing, we have to first look at which type of organization are we managing. So, we will talk about these types of organizations during this course, and we will see that in our analysis these aspects become very important. So, in my discussion I have tried to raise many issues about organizations, and I have also tried to say that no management philosophy, perhaps whatever it is, will succeed unless we have understood the actually characterization of an organization in terms of the parameters which we have discussed just now. So, I will close my discussion on organizations now before we take up another topic about some of the issues of the management. I will present to you an interview with an entrepreneur who will share with us the experience, the philosophy, the technology and the beginning of that idea which we said is the minds of people which start organizations.